Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the second season of OnPoint. I'm joined by my business partner and co-host Amardeep Sirha. How are you, Ams?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm really good. How was your summer?
Good, good. A lot of change, but good. I'm happy.
You
How about
managed to get away, didn't you?
Oh yeah, I went to the Caribbean. I went to the Caribbean for 2 weeks, soaked up the sun. I moved cities. I've got a garden now. Do you remember back when we first started the consultancy and I was all cooped up in my dining room? Well,
Yeah, I only
the
saw
dining
that.
table that was in the flat. None of that anymore. She's
Yeah,
back.
you actually have a proper house and a garden. So
Yeah.
now that we've finished COVID and we're past it, now you have a
Yeah, I've
garden.
got a desk set up finally.
Yeah, wrong way around, but we're there. But yeah, no, awesome. Glad you had a good summer and a good break. Yeah, really excited to start the second season of On Point. We've got some really good guests lined up over the next few months. Our first guest, I'm really excited to introduce. I've known him for about 7 or 8 years now, having done some work with him in the past. But we're delighted to be joined, by Sacha Zvetelman. Hello there, Sacha.
Hello, Ben. Hello, Amardeep. How are you doing?
We're
Yeah, good
doing well.
thanks.
Yeah, really excited. Sacha, could you start off by maybe giving all the listeners a bit of a background and intro to yourself?
Absolutely. And I'm very glad you didn't ask me to speak about my summer because compared to Amardeep's, not that good. But yeah, I'm Sacha Zvetelman. Been working in software engineering for, close to 15 years or so. Currently working at Growth Kitchen as head of engineering. Previously worked at Just Eat and different businesses both in the UK and in Argentina. That's where I'm from originally. Been started as a software engineer, junior software engineer back in the days, and started working my way up to different positions: senior engineer, tech lead, development manager, however you want to call them. So here I am now.
Tell us a bit about. Sorry, just to jump in. I know that Growth Kitchen's obviously a fairly new business. It's nice to do a quick intro into the organisation if you can.
Absolutely. So yeah, it's a startup. It's approximately 2 years old, and basically what we do is a cloud kitchen business, but it's different to the other cloud kitchen businesses out there. So the things that make Growth Kitchen different are, I would say, first of all, the focus and the emphasis on quality, and that applies at all levels. Quality in terms of the food. So the restaurants we partner with are top quality restaurants with really good food. How we operate and run our kitchen hubs is also something that distinguishes us from the competitors, which is all the kitchens are clean, they are smoothly operated. And the idea is that you're a restaurant owner, you want to start, expanding somewhere else. All you have to do is just come to us and we'll get you set up. And there's no, huge investment fee from the get-go. And those are the main things. And the last thing, which is definitely not the least, is the technological aspect of it, or the software aspect of it. And that's where hopefully I will make an impact.
Yeah, no, fantastic. It's been a big market over the last few years, hasn't it? I think I'm probably the biggest user of these of these applications and businesses, to be honest with you. So, Ams, you are as well. I know that.
100%. 100%. Oh, that's excellent. I was going to ask the question just before you went into that did you not manage to get back to Argentina over the summer?
I actually went before the summer.
Right.
And I'm going again now in November. So yeah, because summer here is winter there. So
okay.
That's why I prefer to stay here during the summer, enjoy the sun, because we had the sun this time.
Had a lot of sun, yeah.
Yes.
We've had a lot of sun.
And then I'll go back in November for a few weeks.
Excellent.
Oh, cracking. So yeah, as I was saying at the beginning, Sacha and I, we go back a few years. I've done some recruitment for Sacha, and knowing him fairly well from just keeping in contact over the last few years, especially at your time at Just Eat. we one of the big thing that I know as my with my recruitment background is the culture that Just Eat created, and the reason why people go to work there, and everything that comes off the back of that. And the topic that we wanted to discuss today, which is something that I'm glad for once I can have a little bit more involvement in than the kind of more technical conversations, is setting up candidates for interviews, and how to hire the best engineers, the best processes, and understanding that from both sides as well. And I guess that at the moment, Sash, you're in a situation where you're at a startup business where you're going to be looking to build an engineering team.
That's absolutely correct. Yeah, we're in the process of doing that at the moment. So yeah, I think this conversation comes at the right time.
So like it's an interesting one, isn't it? If I start off by saying with a candidate, how do you set up candidates for success? What's the best process that if I send a candidate over to you, how do we work the best process for a successful interview procedure?
Yeah, I think that the first thing I want to mention is that there is no silver bullet. I know I work in engineering, but hiring and dealing with people is not an exact science. So there's no one size fits all in this kind of thing. But I think it's a combination of things that you can do so that the candidates can perform at their best during an interview process. And at the same time, you can give them all the information that they deserve, right? Because I always say this is a two-way interview. And I think many companies get that wrong. The first thing I think that is important is to see if the candidate needs any sort of special accommodations. Not every person is the same. Not every person is comfortable in the same environment. So there are some people that would prefer to have, I don't know, like an interview face-to-face. Some people would not like that. Some people would prefer to have the camera off, or some people would not need a tiny bit more time than others to do the interview. So this is the first step, in my opinion, to make sure that everyone is comfortable before going to an interview. I think the other thing is about information. When you interview someone, you have all the information about the candidate, or as much as you can. You have their CV. You have, if you're working with a recruiter, a good recruiter, you normally have a bit of a summary of the person that you're going to be interviewing. And I think where many companies fail is that they don't provide that same level of information to the candidate. So many times it happened to me in the past that I went to an interview and I didn't know exactly what the interview was going to look like, who was going to be interviewing me, what sort of things I should be expecting or preparing for the interview, etc.
That's a really good point, actually, because I think you're right. And I've never actually really thought about that. When a candidate comes to an interview, the person on the other side of the table knows as much as they can possibly know about the candidate, but you might not even know the name sometimes, and sometimes they change the person who's interviewing you right at the last minute as well. So even if you've done a little bit of research, if I found out I'm having an interview with Ben Alexander, I might have had a look on LinkedIn, and then sort of 15, or I walk into the interview and there's someone else sat there as well, it can throw you off guard. And I think another really important point as well is that there's this perception that candidates think they're going into an interview to maybe be set up to fail. And actually, nobody wants to lengthen an interview process. Everybody around the table, when you're in an interview, wants you to get the job. And I think that's a really important thing to make people feel comfortable when they're going into an interview, that this is not, they're not going to ask you trick questions. Well, if they are, that's really sad if people are still asking trick questions. But generally speaking, the other side of the table also want you to get the job. Everybody wants you to get the job.
I think from my perspective, it's so important that a recruiter spends time at the beginning of a process understanding enough about the company. So if we were to be working together today, Sacha, I'd be up at the office. I want to see the environment. I'd want to know the journey. I want to see how far you're off from the tube station. I'd want to know, the plans. Of course, I'll know the tech stack. But there's so much more to it because candidates have got so many options at the moment. The market's never been crazier. Yeah. And there's an old client that I work with who, funny enough, I don't work with now, mainly for this reason, but they refuse to give any information before the interview. So it's like, and it was just, and to be fair, it's, in my 17 years, it's the only company that's ever done that. and I'm sure they've got their reasons, but they wouldn't even say who the interviewer is. I don't know if they thought I was going to prep them too much or what have you, but they wouldn't even give the name of the interviewers. So the candidates were really going in blind. And I just thought it was an absolute disaster. You know, I can't understand how on earth they thought that that's a process that's going to work. But it's important that right from the start, and again, I think this is where there's problems with bigger recruitment companies who have got kind of maybe more old school bosses who are just like, right, get the jobs out, get CVs, get them in. Like you have to take a lot of time to work closely with your agencies or if your internal teams, what have you, to promote and explain the opportunities of the business the best that you can.
Absolutely. Yeah, I fully agree with both of you. And I want to go back for a second to what Amardeep was saying about these 3 questions, right? That's something I actually put a lot of emphasis on, which is, I think there are many companies out there or interviewing managers out there that are still asking either 3 questions or questions that are completely irrelevant to what you would normally do if you were to join the company. I don't think those questions are asked out of malice. I think it's just not having, again, this deep understanding of how important it is to do good interviews and design good interviews, right? I think one problem that, at least in my opinion, that we have in the industry is that, or not this industry in particular, like in general, is that there's a lot of information on, things that you should do when you go to an interview, right? Things that you should prepare, how you should prepare, come across, and what are the things you should mention, what examples of answers you should prepare. But there's not a lot of, preparation for how you should actually conduct an interview as an interview manager.
Yeah. What's really interesting is sorry, Ben, you were going to say something.
No, I'm interested to see how he'd take as a manager, how you should conduct an interview. But
we're going to, and I think my point will lead on to that nicely. I've had like really good experience of being interviewed and interviewing, and I've had really poor. One of the worst questions I was asked in an interview was some strange question about, and I think it was to do with psychology, but there's so much water in this vase, and you need to get it into 3 different vases and stuff like that. And I looked at the guy and I thought, I know what you're doing here, but I just said I'd probably Google it. Like, I'd probably Google how to get the water in if I didn't know the answer. And they were a bit like, oh, like taken aback. And I was like, I don't understand that's exactly what anybody would do if they didn't know the answer. They would Google it. But a better experience I had of interviewing is actually how I got into technology. So the first company I worked for in technology was Sky. And I got completely and utterly, like, just really didn't do well in the interview. And I got really thorough feedback, but I was ultimately rejected. And I was like, okay, so I'm not going to have a career in technology. And then 3 months later, the talent team reached back out to me and said, I would like to welcome you to interview again. Based on it's been 3 months, based on lots of different factors. And we hope that you took our feedback seriously. And I thought, I'm glad I did, actually, because sometimes you don't. And when I went back, I got the job. So that was quite interesting that they rejected me, but they didn't just reject me and bin me. They must have had some sort of internal process where it's kind of like, not right now. Let's just park this lady and we'll go back to her. So that's interesting. But yeah, how to conduct a good interview, I guess. It's a good question. I suppose the listeners will be on the edge of their seats right now.
Well, I hope so. No, it's not that interesting. There are a few things that I like to do when interviewing people. It goes hand in hand with what I was talking about previously, which was making people feel comfortable, making people feel, because it's true, I'm not lying, this is a 2-way conversation. It's not like, okay, me grilling you with questions until you fail, or me asking you this, again, out of topic or insane questions that I don't even know the answer to, right?
Yeah.
So again, it's making them feel comfortable. So for instance, the first question I always ask in an interview is ask for their preferred pronoun, right? Everyone should be able to feel comfortable and feel they can be their authentic selves at any point working with us, of course. And that includes the first point of contact or the first step, which is the interview. Then I always make a few clarifications. In fact, it's a bit boring for the interviewees, I feel sorry for them, but I prefer to do this as we start. So again, it helps them hopefully feel a bit more relaxed. So the next thing I do is I mentioned that, English is not my mother tongue. So perhaps I have a weird accent. Perhaps, we are online and there are, internet issues or the speakers are not great. So if you don't understand anything I say, ask me and I will repeat it as many times as possible. I also say that, if they need a break, they can take as many breaks as they need for water, for toilet, whatever it is. Okay. Even if they're nervous, we need to pause for 5 minutes. That's totally fine. This is, again, if you were having a pint with a friend or a coffee with a friend and you wanted to take 5 minutes, you took 5 minutes. So the same applies here. I also mentioned, and this applies to this exact moment right now, that if I look to the other side of the screen, or if you see me typing, it's not that I'm not paying attention or sending GIFs on Slack, although I really like doing that, to be honest, is that I'm taking notes. Exactly. I'm taking notes. I have my other screen here, and that's why I'm not looking into the camera 100% of the time. So it's these small things that will help the candidate feel, okay, yeah, if he's not looking at me, it's not that he's bored or he thinks my answers are stupid. It's just, okay, he's taking notes, he's looking at his other screen. And then the first question I try to ask always is, okay, who are you? But tell me about you as a person. Let's forget about the interview for a minute. Let's forget about your CV. No one cares about your CV for now, or your professional you. Who are you as a person? We're potentially going to be spending 40 hours a week?
Yeah.
Working together, interacting. I want to know, what sort of person are you? What interests you? What makes you feel comfortable? So that's the main thing I do when interviewing.
Do you know what? Ben, I don't know if Catherine's going to be happy right now, but Ben has this, you'll see him writing all the time when we're doing podcasts, and he takes brilliant notes. And afterwards, we try and implement some of the things that you've said. And that was, by the way, some absolutely outstanding. And I think you said at the beginning that you think that is going to be boring advice. Actually, I've just taken on every one of those points is brilliant, because now the person's coming and they're comfortable. They're comfortable straight away. So they'll be they'll try and be their true, authentic self. But I know that Catherine has mentioned to me and Ben, you're always looking away from the camera. You're always doing this. Now I know what he's doing, and Ben knows. He just takes notes, and I think that's obviously good, and that's a good way of doing it. But it's interesting. I'm trying to recall now all the interview processes I might have been through, and there was one interview that I went for quite a senior position from what I was doing, and it was quite a big position in the company. And I went in, and I'm generally quite a confident person, but I kept messing up, and sort of 10 minutes into the interview, the director went, Amardeep, do you need a minute? Do you want to go? And I smoked. So he was like, go and have a cigarette and come back as Amardeep that we already know. And honestly, I got the job. And I walked out, felt like I've definitely I've messed this up, came back in, but felt a lot more relaxed. And I got the job. And it's only because they took the time to say that, go and take the break. So it's interesting that.
From my perspective, it's the whole since COVID, and we're doing interviews now on video. So I guess it's slightly moving back the other way, but I'd still say 90% of the clients are doing first stage interviews on video. They're beginning to move to face-to-face second stages. But how hard is it from a video, to be your authentic self and to be as relaxed as you would be if you go into an office, and to give you the different body language. So I think the last couple of years have been a real challenge. And I think that if we look at how we interviewed 2 years ago compared to how we interview now online, it is completely different. I remember giving advice to people who do videos, and I'm like, make sure you haven't got your dirty laundry in the background, and like, do you know what I mean? It's so crazy to look back at it, but it's I think that's a really good bit of advice, because for myself, if I have a candidate and they're interviewing with you, Sacha, the first thing I'm saying is Sacha is such a great guy, really easy to speak to, relax, be yourself, blah, blah, blah. But and maybe I'm lucky, but all my clients are like that. I'm not saying, by the way, like, be prepared, this guy's going to drill into you straight away and make you feel uncomfortable. Generally, all my customers, in my opinion, do make you feel relaxed. But I'm sure not every everybody is like that. So a candidate will judge one experience to the next, and it's like, okay, of course this Sasha's going to be nice, but if they don't feel relaxed themselves as soon as they speak to you, they just think that I'm kind of, it's a bit of hearsay. But it is really important. And I think that's the best bit of advice I can give to managers, because you're absolutely correct. When they've got lots of interviews, it's more about the candidate, but you want them to be as relaxed and to be as good as they can be. And we'll get on to stuff like technical interviews in a bit, because that, I think, can play a part in, live pairing, for example, and stuff like that. And I think that that's something that you could take into consideration.
Can I just add something onto your kind of tips and advice, because you said a good one, which I don't think we use actually, Ben, and we can definitely implement, which is, what is your preferred pronoun? Something we always do though is, and I said it to you when we first started the call, am I pronouncing your name correctly? Because I have my name pronounced correctly daily, and I don't like it, and it is something that can really get my back up. I'm very, defensive, and I get really annoyed. So it's something we try in Amardeep to really make sure we get. So that's definitely a tip out there. If you don't know how to pronounce someone's name, just ask them, because there's nothing worse than sitting in an interview where you're already nervous and you really want to get the job, and somebody's just mispronouncing your name throughout the whole interview.
I think that's a really good point. And yeah, I do that as well. And even if it's a name that looks familiar to you, perhaps they come from a different place and it's pronounced completely different.
Agreed.
So that's a really good point.
Well, yeah, we were joking before we started that I've been pronouncing your surname incorrectly for the last 7 odd years. So yeah, I'm glad I've never had to introduce you as with your surname as well before. So moving forward, I think I think they're really, really good bits of advice. I mean, and again, just I could generally talk all day about these, about kind of what I think is good for candidates and clients and what have you. I think we've got to try and keep it within the realms of, enough time for the audience to stay interested. One big thing for me within interview processes is communication, and it's my biggest bugbearer when I can't get communication from a client, or they chase me in the CVs, or someone suddenly goes on holiday. That's the biggest problem. You'll hear me moan about this on LinkedIn. Recently over the summer periods, for example, you get availability for candidates and, a really important job, and then the manager goes on holiday, and I get it that they're busy and they kind of say, right, Ben, look for these people while I'm away. But I'm prioritizing my time to turn around urgent requirements with customers. Everyone needs somebody tomorrow, but if I am asking when you go on holiday, and it's like, it's a bit nosy, Ben. It's like, I'm going on holiday in like 2-3 weeks. Like, perfect. I need to know when you're away, how you're away, because I need to communicate this to the candidates. And I've got good little kind of routines and ideas that have worked around communication, but I think that's probably the most important thing, to be honest with you, because it can also have a detrimental effect on your business if the candidate doesn't have feedback and goes to speak to other candidates, etc. How do you ensure a good communication process, or how have you done that over the years, Sacha?
Yeah, that's I fully agree with what you were saying, and it's not that easy to get all the communicational aspects of the interview process right, because normally it involves a lot of people. Okay, so perhaps it's me, it's a couple of engineers, perhaps it's an internal recruiter or HR person. You have the external recruiter, you have the candidate, you have other companies, other recruiters as well. So coordinating and making sure everything goes smoothly is tough. Okay, but I think the key thing is, like, going back to what you were saying at the beginning, the market is crazy now, and it's been for a while, and engineers have plenty of opportunities out there. So basically, as a company or as a hiring manager, you need to be able to capitalize on the moment, those key moments in which the other person is interested in either having an interview, joining you, whatever it is, but you need to time things right. So what I always try to do, or what we try to do in the teams I've been a part of, is, first of all, not delay any feedback. So we interview someone, maximum 24, 36 hours after the interview takes place, we need to have a wash up session and feedback ready for our HR person or talent partner to reach out to the candidate. And there has to be some feedback, positive, constructive, but there needs to be some feedback. Again, going back to Amardeep's example, you got feedback, you learn from it, and you use it in your favor, right? So we want to give that same opportunity to everyone who interviews with us, right?
Yeah.
So that, I think that's the crucial thing. I think, yeah, many people get that wrong, and they're like, you know what, we really like this candidate, but let's wait 3 weeks and see if we find another one that we like even better.
Yeah.
If you're not sure about the candidate, you're not sure, don't hire, okay? But this thing of, okay, let's see if something better comes our way, it won't work. And you know, when I come here and sit and talk about these things, that doesn't mean either the companies I work for, my teams, or myself do everything really well and we don't screw up. The opposite, we screw up. Okay, we're trying to improve and get things right.
I think, yeah. So there's so many examples that I can pull in from kind of recently and over the years, but I've had that recently where there's been a couple of good candidates, and do we wait and see this guy again because we're unsure? And then and it's, you know, I'm sure the client, if he's listening, probably will be will actually put his hands up and say, yeah, we got that wrong, because it's the whole bird in the hand. They had 2 good candidates and ended up losing out on both candidates because, hey, guess what? You know, they're good candidates and the market's busy. But I would say that hopefully where they're at the moment, I mean, I guess by the time this goes live, we'll see, they've learned from the mistake and they have rectified this in terms of quicker feedback. I think it's sometimes difficult putting in SLAs and trying to put, you know, strong agreements in place. I think it's wrong if I was to send you a contract and we contractually have to give feedback in a certain amount of time. I think there can be lots of different factors into the feedback, but from a recruitment perspective, you know, and kind of champion the recruiters, it's so important to get feedback because it looks bad on us. If a candidate interviews you and they're not right, and it's just, I'll bet they're a no. If I just say to the candidate they're a no, it looks bad on me. I need to get the feedback and understand. So I'm doing my job that the commute. So, you know, more often than not, again, not so much now. I think previously when I had a bigger agency, lots of staff and it was very difficult to stay on top of. Now with a smaller niche, you know, agency, when typically I'm the sole supplier, it's a lot easier to stay on top of. But making sure that we get the feedback and in the importance of understanding that feedback, because, you know, we're championing your brand in the marketplace. You know, we are an extension of your team. So I think sometimes managers who are so busy and recruitment is just like, oh, it's an agent, I haven't got the time. I don't work with those companies anymore, because if I can't get that feedback, it's not going to help your business. It's not going to help me recruit for you next time around. So it's the communication channel between myself and the client is the most important thing, first of all, to really establish and understand, and, you know, where the candidates come from, why I have to be a pest and why I have to make sure we get feedback in a certain amount of time, etc. That it's passed on to the candidate. So yeah, plenty of examples that I can talk about from why the communication channels are so important. Probably the biggest thing for you know, obviously you're an engineer manager. Again, for the last 17 years, the majority of the positions I've recruited for are engineering. And this is a really hot topic for me, right? And again, it's almost like there isn't a one size fits all. I'm sure you're going to agree, because different companies, etc. But what's your thoughts on finding the technical ability from a candidate? Do you have technical tests, and if so, how do you feel the best way to understand technical capabilities is?
Yeah, I think yes, we were saying at the beginning, there's no silver bullet, in particular with technical tests. I've been interviewing for more years than I would like to admit, to be honest, but we've tried many different ways. So we've tried, I don't know, like more like simple algorithmical coding tests, online tests. We've tried with take-home tests. We tried with pairing sessions. We try with no coding test, but more of like a conversational Q&A or scenario-based situation. And again, I don't think there's one single solution, because each person feels more comfortable in a different with a different type of test, right? You have the people who are like, oh, pair programming, I'm really happy with that. I can nail that one. But then you have the people who are terrorized about having to pair during an interview with 1 or 2 engineers. And again, I don't blame them, right? I don't like that either personally. So I think what we've been doing recently, and I think this is the best alternative, not perfect, is to have a technical test that you send to candidates they can do on their own time that is very, very related to what you do on a daily basis at work. Okay, so no, not the type of test like, okay, go and, I don't know, solve this maze using this weird algorithm from this guy that discovered it or invented it in 1973. That's not the type of test I'm talking about. It's more of like, okay, let's say we build web applications, okay, to manage our kitchens. Okay, so let's just use that example. Okay, why don't you work on something that is very related to that domain, okay, and is using the same, not necessarily the same technologies, but similar technologies and the same level of complexity of things that we would do on a daily basis, okay? If you can do that, you can probably do what we would have to do on a daily basis, right? But this thing of, I don't want to badmouth special companies or specific companies, but this type of Google, Apple, Facebook type of interview, it works for them because it's them. But for the rest of the companies, if you ask a candidate to invert a binary tree, perhaps they do it because they studied for it, but are they gonna do that any day at work? The answer is no. I highly doubt so. The other thing is being mindful about people's time, right? You cannot send a technical test that will take 3 days to do. It has to be a couple of hours, 3 hours maximum. And again, you need to give the flexibility for them to work on their own time. And one important thing, and this again goes back to the whole transparency and communicational aspect of the interview process, is that, for instance, the technical test that we are sending at the moment at Growth Kitchen is on GitHub, publicly available. Anyone can go and check it out now. And, there's nothing for us to hide. If you're interested in interviewing with us, that's the technical test you will have to do. You think that you're not interested in doing that technical test, that's perfectly fine, but you have all the information. Okay.
That's really good, Sacha. I've one of the company that I've had experience with had all their interview process, what it looks like, the people that are involved, who those people are, the technical test, and they had like various different technical tests depending on which part of software engineering you were going into. All of them are on their public GitHub, and it's the first experience I had, and that was about 2 years ago. And I thought, oh, that's really interesting. And when I spoke to the talent team and whatnot, they were just like, the thing is, rather be transparent, because actually it makes the candidate process a lot better as well. Because if they've got questions, they can ask them well in advance as well, and they can prepare. I've also seen a lot of talk recently on LinkedIn and threads of conversations around somebody mentioned that like a technical test was sort of between 5 and 6 hours. And so the comment that this person had written, and they named the company, they said, I'm wondering if you're going to pay me a day rate to do that technical test. And they said when they received the technical test, as much as they would have liked to work for the company and everything, they just, based on that length of time for a technical test, they declined it. I think there's a lot of, it's interesting what's going to happen to the technical test as well, because I've also seen people write posts about, I'm applying for a role, you've seen my experience, and now you want me to prove it on what you mentioned earlier, a technical test that's not relevant to what I'll be doing day to day. And the only thing I can really align that with myself is, I used to be a teacher, and I don't know if it's changed now, but when you do an interview for teaching, it's the most harrowing experience you've ever experienced. You firstly have to teach a lesson. So you're going into a school where the children don't know you. You're jumping in mid-curriculum, midweek. If they give you a year 9 class on a Wednesday before lunchtime, you haven't got the job. And you go in and you have to teach a full lesson. So that's an hour from start to finish. Once that's done, they grade you, and then you have to go and do a full interview process after that. And I just thought, after doing years and years of that kind of interview process, I thought, what are they doing? What on earth are they doing? Because they're also judging you on that one lesson for that one particular day, and then they're going to give you a permanent position. So it's interesting what's going to happen to the tech test.
Yeah, I mean, my honest opinion, I think what I like, what I've seen work, and companies that I've helped scale the best with the best talent. I think I think tests from home are okay as long as they're not too intrusive in your evening and your families and everything else, because that's just going to put people off. And they may have other tests as well. I really like the idea of having everything clear from the start. Right, this is a page on the GitHub, and it's like this is the process. So you can see it, it's public to everybody. This isn't no smoke and mirrors from any recruitment company. But I always like an initial conversation. Because if I spoke to you, Sacha, I'm gonna go Brave Kitchen. What a great journey that sounds like they're on. He sounds a fantastic guy. Do you know what? I'm gonna really try hard on this one. There's nothing worse than people rushing if they're suddenly going on holiday to try and get a test in or anything else. That you want to take your time. You want to give the best version of yourself that you can get across. I think people over engineer tests from home. I think it's a case that, for me, what works well is a nice taster. Do some work. Maybe don't spend more than an hour. Do some incredible notes around your. It's normally down to approach. Making sure that people are working in a modern way. And then I like pairing. I know I get this is the important thing. I get it's daunting. Like if you watch me write an email over my shoulder, I'd spell every word wrong. I get that, but I think that you'll see that I know what words I'm writing out. And I think if people are relaxed again to say, look, you're going to make mistakes. We know you're not going to be pitch perfect, but as long as we can see your approach, we can see how you go around testing or whatever it might be, then that's enough for us because we can see the start of what you've done. If you do good notes, say, look, I spent an hour on this. This is why I did it this way. This is how I'd scale it. This is how I'd add on to it. And then you do a little bit in an interview, maybe for half an hour, 45 minutes pairing. I think that normally goes down quite well. That seems to be, and again, some people do not like pairing though. Some people prefer to do a test from home. I'd say the majority of people don't like doing tests from home. But again, you can't have 2 or 3 different ways of interviewing, can you? Each company has to have a process that works best for them. And I think that's the real challenge, because whatever I say, there's always going to be somebody it's like a manager picking a football team. There's always going to be somebody who doesn't like doing a test from home or doesn't like pairing or doesn't want to spend too much time. But it's a big challenge. But a good question for you, and I think this is something that's changed over the last couple of years. I'm going a little bit, probably haven't prepared so much on this one, Sacha, but it's hiring for current skills against attitude and people who because there's a lot of companies that I know and I've worked with that maybe the candidates that they've interviewed haven't quite got exactly what they're looking for, but my word, are they passionate? Do they want to learn? Have they got the right attitude and commitment? And Amardeep and I know that Amazon's the same with me on this, very much about skills being taught with that right attitude. Is that something that you agree with and you've done before, or?
Yes, I do, and we have done that in the past. But I think again depends so much on the context, the company that you are working at, the size of the team, how experienced the team is. So, for instance, right now we're just starting to build the engineering team at Growth Kitchen. At this point, right now, I need people who can join us and more or less hit the ground running. Of course, there will be a lot of coaching, helping. We will, sort it out together. That's how it goes. Pardon my French. But at this stage, I cannot hire someone who comes from a completely different background because I don't have the structure, or we don't have the structure to, train them. Whereas in my previous employer, when I was working at Just Eat, we had a much bigger, well-established team structure. We had a lot of people who would help new joiners, training them up. And in that case, we were looking for, more of an attitude rather than specific technology. So it really depends. Ideally, I would like to get to a situation in which we don't really care at all about what technologies you have worked with in the past, and you can just join us and learn with us. But right now, as of today, it's not that easy.
It's the one message that's come out of this, isn't it? I think, and it's a really good topic. And again, I could honestly talk about this all day. And anybody who's listening, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to have a chat with anybody from my experience and what I think works well and doesn't work well. But each company is so different, and you're absolutely right. We work with we're working with startups now. It's very similar to yourself, who have got massive growth plans, but it's about, you have production deadlines and, building MVPs and everything else. And it's a case of, look, that's great, but we need to get past stage one. And when we get to scale up, then we can change this. And it's understandable. I think the bigger companies, the problem is actually thinking out loud, the bigger companies who are a bit more corporate, probably their process are, have you got the skill set? There's somebody sitting, unfortunately, I'm slagging off some internal talent teams, but if you don't have a particular technology in your CV, you won't even get through to you, but they're good engineers. And I can say it to some blue in the face, and they're the kind of companies that should be hiring more on attitude than skill set at the moment. But yeah, it sounds a very exciting time down at Growth Kitchen. I know you're a very busy guy, so I really appreciate your time coming on today. I'm looking forward to catching up with you properly now. It's been a couple of years. I think I say this quite a lot with through COVID, but now that everyone's slowly going back into the office, it's good to kind of go and catch up with everybody. So yeah, listen, thank you very, very much for coming on. I really appreciate it. I'll say it to anybody who comes on the show. Are you open for anybody reaching out and connecting to you on LinkedIn and everything like that?
Absolutely. First of all, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure. And yeah, if anyone wants to contact me, ask me questions, have a virtual chat or a coffee, I'm always open to that. Or if anyone needs some help, whatever it is, just contact me.
And I can say, and I mean that. Sasha's a very approachable guy. I've asked Sacha. I've gone to him for questions in the past regards technologies and interviews and everything else. And he is as nice and approachable as he seems. So everybody who's interviewing with him is probably giving you some nice tips. You've got no excuses now. But yeah, listen, thanks again for coming on. Have a great rest of the day, and I look forward to speaking to you soon.
Thanks, Sacha.
Likewise, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.